Hello, folks. Another episode of Burning Platform. This time it's my good friend for God knows how long, Thomas Otter, now a general partner at Acadian Ventures. Thomas, so nice to see you. I was at Acadian National Park last week with my wife
Oh, cool.
in Maine. What a gorgeous state. So this already got me in a good mood looking at
Yeah,
you.
that's actually where the name of the firm comes from. Jason, my partner, has got some family who live near there, so that when he was in the park, that's what gave him the idea for the name of the fund. So that's got the connection. So you managed to pick that out. Cool.
So Thomas and I are going to talk about, one of my research focus areas, which is global opportunities in software, especially in emerging economies. And, Thomas is looking at it from an investment perspective, but it'd be nice to get a perspective on how the world has changed in the last few years and how it's going to accelerate in the changes. Thomas, thank you for joining me. I know you want to present a few slides. Why don't we do that and then look forward to our conversation?
Cool. Great. Yeah. Thanks, Vinnie. Thanks very much. Yeah. So just to put Acadian in some kind of context, we're a venture capital fund. We invest specifically in the future of work. Some of you may remember that term HR tech, but that's the kind of space that we live. Jason, my partner, and I, we both have a long analyst and operator background. I was at SuccessFactors for a while, in SAP and Gartner. Jason was at Yankee Group and Cornerstone. And Jason realized in 2019 there was an opportunity to develop a specialized fund focusing on the future of work. And from the instantiation of the firm, the basic principle was that we would invest globally. We felt that there was an opportunity in this space to do things outside of the traditional just Silicon Valley or London type approach to investing. We felt that there was a great opportunity beyond, and that's been a big part of our firm's thesis. So, the one I'm going to pick up on here is the global focus. We've done investments now, I think, in 17 different countries, ranging from the US, UK, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, Mexico, Singapore, Malaysia. We've done one recently in Kenya, and we've also done one recently in Saudi Arabia. And one of the things I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes is exploring some of the reasons behind those decision-making criteria. But the basis of our firm is we believe that work is transforming, work is changing. How work is done in terms of remote work, in terms of augmented work with artificial intelligence, the globalization, the fragmentation of work. All these things are creating an immense investment opportunity. And there's one number that people say, oh, is this market big enough? And when they ask me that, I reply with this question: this is the number of people that go to work every day, right? So there are 3.3 billion people going to work in some form or other every single day. And it's our belief that the systems that support those people could do with some improvements. And depending on the market you're in, depending on the job you're in, these systems could be quite different.
That's a very modest statement. Could use some improvement.
Well, some things work pretty well, but a lot of things in the tech space, especially in the future of work, especially in HR tech, could do with some change. Payroll was developed. The first business application ever was actually a payroll. It was done in 1951 in the UK, and the cool thing about this story is they built the payroll, the programming language, and the computer in just over 2 years. So, but that was one of the first, the first instantiation of a business application. So we've seen, HR tech's evolved tremendously over the years, but we still see, many areas of where there's opportunity for disruption, either disruption of incumbent vendors or of new categories or of new of new markets altogether. And we want to talk a little bit about the new markets, but
And Thomas, even though it's like you say, the first use case or first business application, it's remarkable how little even the biggest vendors support global payroll support, right? I mean, out of the 100 and how many countries we have, so few are really supported by even the bigger ones. So
there's a challenge. There's a challenge with HR tech, which is, it's not unique, but it's unusual in that the regulatory factors by country tend to dominate the industry vertical trends. So, in many areas of business, you might say, okay, well, we do manufacturing, and then you've got this, this focus on manufacturing software, for instance, and then, you can then take your manufacturing software, once it's been successful in country A, you can sell it in country B, C, D, and E. Whereas with a lot of the HR tech, because of its tight regulatory component, you need to understand, and sometimes cultural factors as well, you need to understand those specifics of the local market in order to be successful. It's no good taking a US payroll and trying to deploy it in France, for instance, whereas you might be able to take a clever manufacturing product and then deploy that in France. But with a lot of the HR stuff, there's a strong local dimension to HR tech, which we find we find fascinating and interesting. So, taking an example, for instance, of our investment, we recently did an investment in a company called Palm HR, which is based out of Saudi Arabia. And the founder there is actually an Austrian guy called Richard Schrems. And he went there as an expat early on in his career. And he realized that, for the large companies, the Saudi Aramcos and so on, they're running the SAPs and Oracles and so on of this world. But for the mid-market companies in Saudi, there weren't really good systems in place, and there's some specific local challenges in terms of how payroll is structured, in terms of right to left character sets, in terms of the calendaring. They have different days of the week off compared to other countries, and they run actually on a completely different calendar. So being able to handle and manage those things is really, really important for companies in those markets. And yet there weren't the products to support that. So he had this idea to build essentially a core HR and payroll system eventually for the whole Arab world. And we think that's a super investment thesis, and that's something we think we can be part of. Similarly, in Mexico, we invested in a company called Worky. And what Worky realized is that the compliance regulations in Mexico were changing to make it important that smaller companies actually had a payroll. Because what was happening before is a lot of people were just on contractor contracts rather than on employee contracts. And when you have a contractor, they just send you an invoice and you pay it, and then the contractor themselves is responsible for the payroll. Whereas the legislation changed to make it such that smaller companies actually needed to employ workers. And that generated in itself a great opportunity for an SME payroll in Mexico. We've seen the same. I was in Kenya the other week, and we've made an investment in a company called WorkPay in Kenya. And the thesis there is very, very similar, perhaps even more exciting, in that the sub-Saharan African economies are rapidly digitalizing. In fact, there is more electronic banking and mobile banking in Kenya than in any country in the world. 75% of the GDP goes through an electronic banking application called M-Pesa. So the level of sophistication, even though the application is fundamentally simple, the level of digitalization in Kenya from a banking point of view far exceeds the US, where in many cases you still have paper pay slips, right? Where you still get paid by check in some companies. Whereas the payment mechanisms in Kenya are further along in a digitalization perspective. So what's happening now in many of these markets is that the governments are starting to move to electronic filing. And as these governments move to electronic filing, so that will drive a demand for stronger administrative solutions in mid-size and smaller companies. So, that just some of the things that are exciting us about the international,
So Thomas, talking about Saudi Arabia, I'm going to date myself here, but it was mid-80s, and we were putting in all kinds of systems for not Aramco Petromin, which is a domestic oil company, and one of them happened to be HR and payroll. I don't know what possessed them to buy an American piece of software for that, but the issues we had to overcome, support for multiple wives, right?
Yeah.
No American software feature.
No, except perhaps in Utah, but everywhere else, it's not really the case. But
you talk about pushing the boundaries of the software.
Yeah, completely. But those things are, and what's interesting is those things you can't just wish them into the product. They've actually got an architectural dimension to the product. So you have to kind of understand those requirements before you start building the product. So this is why it's often hard for international vendors to move into those markets and do the sort of last mile of localization, if you like, because it would often drive an architectural change to those products. And there's another interesting democratization happening in technology, which is the democratization in terms of access to platforms. So 15 years ago, if you were trying to build a software company in Africa, in say Kenya, you need to find a data center, you need to find how am I going to do this, and what software, how I'm going to support the infrastructure, and that's really difficult. Whereas today, you've got a choice in Nairobi between AWS, Azure, and I think I've picked up on some of this already. But like I said, the emerging markets is really, really important to us, because there are millions and billions of people that go to work in those economies.
And Thomas, I spent a month in India in March, and just that economy is so vibrant. So that in itself is a huge market, right? But the conversations I had were repeatedly about, well, we're doing a lot of business in the Middle East. Those businesses are doing business in the Middle East, in other BRICS countries, in Nigeria, Indonesia, and so on. So just hit me how vibrant a lot of these economies are. And yet, coming back to the West, you talk to vendors and they're like, I don't know if I can make money there. I don't know how I can penetrate that market. It just doesn't seem like they realize how big these markets are.
Yeah, but I think also they will in many cases will have problems being successful in those markets, especially outside of the multinational companies. So if your business is selling to multinationals, then basically the multinational tends to inflict their business practices on the local countries. That's how they've always worked. So the local countries, the subsidiaries fit into what the multinational wants. But for a successful manufacturing company that has, say, 3 operations across sub-Saharan Africa, they're going to want to make sure that they've got good local support, that they're dealing with salespeople that understand local requirements, and that the product is priced appropriately for the local market, and that sort of thing makes it quite difficult for the larger international vendors to penetrate those markets. Similarly, I think it was the same maybe 15 years ago when vendors came from the US and they were trying to establish themselves in Europe. It was pretty tough to figure out, heck, Belgium's different to the Netherlands, and the Netherlands is different from Denmark, and from a US perspective, this was challenging for US vendors because they perceive these to be very small markets. But when you actually look at population numbers in Asia, in Latin America, in Africa, they are significant markets. But it's our thesis that those markets, at least in HR tech or future of work, will be served largely by successful local vendors rather than necessarily by international vendors. And we're hoping to find those local vendors and invest in them, and then bring the experience that we have from the international context into those local vendors, get them talking to each other. So get the Mexican payroll engineer talking to the Kenyan payroll engineer to say, how did you solve scaling of, how did you solve scaling here, or how did you handle this particular type of integration and so on, and get those synergies, going.
So Thomas, go on, finish up your slides, and let's talk about some of how you see the world, how you and Jason see the world, because I'm surprised, I'm impressed how many countries you already are in. So your scope.
So again, we've, a couple of things maybe I pick out, like to pick out on this, pick out on the slide. We're seeing, we're at a point where actually we've got a well-established business model in SaaS, in software as a service now. So that, in one sense, that gives us, a foundation on which to build successful companies. But we're also on the lookout for new business models, new ways of doing things in terms of the actual business model itself. And we're not sure what those future business models are going to be, but we're on the lookout for those. We think there's going to be some form of, new way of doing things beyond just software as a service. At the same time, there's a whole lot of technology innovation going on at the moment, which is super exciting. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of fog. There's a lot of confusion. But we do think that we're at a point where some of the promises that we've been making with AI and things over the last God knows how many years are now starting to look like some of them might actually come true. So we're excited about the opportunities with artificial intelligence that are finally now coming to fruition. So that has a lot of opportunity and a lot of risk and challenges for HR as well.
How about the whole metaverse, Apple Vision Pro? Do you see that change the future of work in a meaningful way, or is it still a consumer toy?
Well, I think there are going to be some very specific useful use cases. We've not made a significant investment there yet, but I saw something that a major German engineering company had been doing recently. They train engineers; that's their business, and they had a virtual power station. They'd created a digital environment that simulated the power station with
a digital twin.
Yeah. So but for training purposes, so you put the goggles on and you'd be in the power station, and then you would flick you would be told, okay, well, now there's been damage to the XYZ reactor, and you now need to close the reactor down. How would you do it? And they're able to simulate that and then create, throw in curveballs into the process and so on to train the staff in new ways. So I think there are already some interesting use cases there.
I've seen an onboarding use case similar, right, where you don't have to assign somebody a human to onboard them, and you can do that virtually. So
yeah, and there will be more and more of that. I think the original sort of meta hype around the metaverse has we're now in the old Gartner curve. I think we're plummeting very fast down the other side of the curve here on some of the meta stuff. But I think some of the concepts are going to be especially I think in the training, in the space of learning are going to be super interesting. Visions of us spending all our days working in the metaverse, I think those are completely overhyped, but I think there are some very exciting specific use cases in terms of training and learning that are exciting.
Well, let's go back to global. So do you have a couple more slides, or?
I do, but I think the global topic's kind of been where we're going to be spending our time. But we I maybe want to mention a bit about this, but we think that as you look at the broader topic of sustainability and of the future of the planet and of how we think about how the world is structured, yeah, work is a big part of that. We spend, many of us spend 8, 10, 12 hours a day, 12 hours a day at work, and work is a big constituent in terms of people's happiness, people's life satisfaction, how most people earn their money. And so we believe that when done right, technology can have a meaningful impact on work. And the concept we use to describe this is sustainable work. We want work to be exciting for people. We want work to be interesting for people. We want people to feel that they were rewarded correctly. And we want organizations to benefit from productivity improvements. So that's kind of a fundamental bedrock, if you like, of our investment thesis. And we try and do so. For instance, we see, and one of the reasons why we're so excited about payroll in emerging markets is it helps drive financial inclusion.
Sure.
Right. So when people have a payroll, it typically means that they will get a bank account. Right. And when they get a bank account, it means that they can participate more freely in commercial transactions, in terms of credit ratings, in terms of financial stability, and so on. We believe that by improving recruitment technologies, you can help people find work that they want to do. We spent a lot of time looking at well-being. How can you actually, work sometimes makes people sick. So, what systems and processes can you put in place to actually improve well-being at work? So we made an investment in a French company that focuses on providing therapy. So you can connect to safely and securely to a therapist if you've got work stress, or you got home stress, or whatever. Career progression. We made an investment in a really cool company in the UK called Progression, etc. And we believe that these categories are what drive our investment portfolio. I mean, we don't distribute completely, like we have to do one investment in each of these categories a year, but these categories we think describe a little bit of what we're doing within the portfolio.
So, like I mentioned, you've obviously got investments in, you said 17 countries?
Yeah, I think that's the number now, yeah.
That is a big charter for just the two of you. How are you, so tell me how you scour, first of all, for investments, and then how you do your risk assessment, your own personal bandwidth issues. Walk us through that process. Because it's fascinating that you're already in so many countries.
Yeah, so one of the things that's interesting about VC, which is unlike a lot of other investment categories, is that VC is a collaborative process. So it's rare that you have one VC investing in a round and they own the whole round. You partner with other VCs. And so what we've been able to do is we've been able to set ourselves up as a specialist future of work VC, so that we don't compete with generalist VCs that write bigger checks than we do. Right. So what will often happen is the generalist VC will be looking at a future work opportunity, and they will say, "Oh, I'd like to get a specialist firm to have a look at this too," and then they call us up, and we see that happening quite a lot. We did an investment in a recent investment in the Netherlands like that, a company called AG5. You'll really like this one. They do last mile skills matching between person and machine in factories. Right, super vertical play. You've got to, they started off with a company. I'm going to tell you about this company because I think it's cool. This guy was Rick. Met somebody who worked at a big coffee manufacturer, coffee company called Dow Jacobs. It's the biggest coffee company in the Netherlands, and they make lots of coffee around the world. So they have all this process for sifting and grinding and roasting and all the rest of it. And they've got all these machines, right? And, some of these machines are dangerous, right? You can, you roast yourself if you're not careful, or you can grind your finger, you don't want to be doing that. So you need to be trained in these specific machines. But these machines are all different, right? So machine A came in 1992, machine B came in 2002, And so you've got a lot of granular, excuse the pun, matching of person to machine at this level. And this is not really done in your success factors, nor is it done in your MES system, right? So there's a space between the MES world and the HR system world where this company AG5 sits, and they're going gangbusters. And they're based in Amsterdam, but we learned about that opportunity because what happened is the partner at another VC called Headline phoned me up and said, Thomas, I found this great company, but I don't understand. I love all the numbers, I love what they're doing, but I don't understand why SAP hasn't built this. And I was able to explain to him in about 3 minutes why SAP wouldn't have built this, because it would have been my job to build it at SAP, and I would never have built it. But I could see exactly why it makes sense for the startup to take this, to take this category, this category on. So we think that there are a lot of these opportunities around the niches, around the existing vendors that are super exciting for us, and that's often where we will, often where we
Talk
will
about
play.
coffee and older equipment. Go back to my India trip. We were in Kerala for a while, and we went to a couple of tea plantations, and both of them had small plants for curling, for cutting, and some of this equipment was 100 years old. You talk about the risks, yeah, but fascinating, right? It's such a niche area that no big vendor is ever gonna want to build something for that niche market.
No, but it could be, if you think about how many factories there are around the world, it could end up being a really big business,
Exactly. Coffee bigger than tea, but you're right.
Yeah.
So thank you for clarifying.
So one thing is we get leads. Sorry, I didn't finish answering the question. The one thing is we get leads from other VCs. That's an important part of what we do. We're also lucky in that many of our investors come from the industry. You will know some of them, and they often provide us leads too. They'll get approached for an angel investment. So a lot of our what are called LPs are executives from the HR tech space. And they get approached for angel investments and so on, and they often bring us leads. And founders, they know about us. We're not super big on marketing, but people have heard about me and Jason, and word gets out, and then founder A talks to founder B, and that network is that we've built up over decades. Now starts to sort of bear fruition. So a lot of it comes informally, and then we spend a lot of time doing analytics. We spend a lot of time, scouring, wasting time reading the internet, and discovering things. And we might have a thesis like, oh, we'd like to do something in this area. Let's research it. And in fact, our investment in Kenya, we had a student, a university student, working for us on an internship last year, and we asked them to go and research the lead VCs in Africa and make a connection with us, with those lead VCs and the top HR tech companies in those regions. And we he actually discovered WorkPay, where we made the investment. So all sorts of ways.
So do you do country risk analysis, or does a lead investor do some of those kind of analytics?
Yeah, we're more interested in doing the diligence on the firm and the founders themselves. We wouldn't call ourselves experts on the political stability or otherwise of markets. I think we'd have to analyze your home country as well if we were going to do that, and I don't want to go there. So that we leave the global, we leave the sort of national level stuff, but we do deep diligence on the companies themselves.
Somebody in the consortium must do that, right?
Yeah, they would do. Yeah. But we do have specialists in emerging markets. So one of the funds that we invested in together was a company called Speed Invest, based out of Austria. and they have they have several partners who are dedicated to emerging markets. So we'd work closely with them, or we'd work with a well-known local VC. So when we did WorkPay, the lead investor was a company called Launch Africa, and they've done over 100. They've done over 100 investments in Africa. Often, also, what happens is these companies are incubated by international incubators. So WorkPay, for instance, went through YC Combinator. So that also gave us, comfort in terms of the financial construction of the business. Yeah.
Or SAP.io accelerators and all.
Exactly. Yeah. We've had several of our portfolio companies go through the SAP.io. We also work closely with Workday Ventures and with other.
Sure.
With other players in this other specialist players in the space.
Are you finding, especially around the emerging economies, some common themes? Are they sharing with each other some best practices? Probably a generic term, but are you finding commonalities?
Sure. So digitization of government processes drives payroll adoption. That's clear. Typically, far better mobile connectivity and mobile usage than is seen in the West. So you'll see a lot more mobile first or mobile only application development, and that's similar whether you're talking to, funny enough, whether Singapore, which is a very sophisticated market, and Kenya. Both of them have very high levels of mobile adoption and mobile commerce. So you'll find mobile becoming a big part of the user experience. You're also seeing new synergies emerging between fintech and HR tech. So in terms of the payroll, how you distribute payroll starts to get very interesting. US is just really starting off with the pay advance processes, but many of those concepts I think have been working elsewhere in the world for a lot longer. So yeah, lots of areas of synergies, and then some of the technical stuff as well, like working with the big providers, the AWSs, the Azures, and so on. There's a lot of sharing of best practices and ideas.
To your point about fintech and HR tech starting to converge, I wrote a case study on Discovery Bank, South Africa. And it was remarkable how, as an insurance company, they started to influence life behavior, work behavior, and so on, right? It's the other way around. Rather than having a payroll system drive fintech, this is an example of fintech driving behaviors. So
yeah, completely. That's a fascinating business, and I think they've done a whole bunch of stuff in terms of the wellness, driving the wellness activities to drive down insurance premiums. It's a really quite a sophisticated play discovery. I think it's probably one of the best examples of an integrated financial services business. It's a fascinating business.
So let's wrap this up. Tell me about a couple of other investments you're close to making, if you're willing to do that, and then also talk about Europe is going through its own challenges. The US is obviously going through its own challenges. What are you finding we're soon going to become the old world, the way the emerging economies are going.
So I'll pick up on a couple. It's hard to know. We've done 30 investments or so it's hard to know which ones to pick. But I'll pick two for you. One of them has a sort of genesis in Africa, but as a US-based company, and that's a company called Arist, ARIST, and basically three students a few years ago, they went to the Sudan as part of their education. They were at MIT, and I think it was either on a secondment or something. They ended up in Sudan, and they realized pretty quickly that in Sudan most people don't have a smartphone, but almost everyone has access in some form or other to SMS. So what they realize is an opportunity to drive learning, through short, sharp SMS delivery. And they went back and they formed this company called Aris to do SMS-based learning. And it started off with SMS-based learning, but then has grown from then to be a very, very effective micro learning platform. And basically, what they've been able to do for several big US companies, especially when they have remote workers or they have employees, for instance, who don't have a corporate phone, right? I've got to pack the shelves as a supermarket. I don't need to watch a YouTube video on how to do that. You can give me 4 or 5 bullet points right now at the point of learning, and that's a really powerful intervention. And that company's going, going really, really well. And then we got two investments in the compensation space, one in the US and one in Paris, both of which are also doing really, really well. And they're addressing pay transparency. So you've seen there's a whole lot of legislative changes in the US. There's similarly legislative changes in Europe in terms of pay transparency. And what these companies done, which is really, really clever, is they developed a real-time survey, compensation survey model. So whereas in the past you would go and you would fill in a survey once a year as a corporation, and then someone would aggregate all that information together and give you a comparison. Now what they can do is, because of the improvements of the APIs into the HR systems, they're able to read real-time the data in the HR systems of their customers, aggregate and anonymize their data, and give you real-time compensation benchmarking, so that you can pay people, that you can make more informed pay decisions. The one in the US is called Compa, and the one in Paris is called Figures. And those are two that have done, that are going really, really well on the compensation, on the compensation side. Again, linking into the, on the slide here, linking into the concept we're talking about, fair and equitable pay.
That's great. Thomas, let's do this every few months.
Oh, I'd love to, Vinnie. It's always good. It's lovely to see you. It's we need to do it in person soon.
We may get a chance to do this pretty soon.
Yeah, and we should talk about cricket.
Absolutely. Talk about globalization. You can't miss that.
Exactly. All right, Vinnie. It's great seeing you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.